So we're going to do this unit in two parts. The first part is temperate fruit. The next part is tropical. Temperate fruits are fruits that need a cold period of time to allow them to develop the next year's fruit. So there's a dormancy period where they complete their life cycle and are able to then produce fruit in the next year. Many of our cold climates are able to grow these fruit crops, and then there are some fruit crops that can't tolerate any cold at all. So some crops that are temperate include apple and pear and peach and plum, strawberries, mulberries, kiwi, and even chestnut. One of those plant families that produces a lot of temperate fruit crops includes Rosaceae. If we had to rank them, it would be the sixth most economically important crop plant family. And it includes apples and pears, peaches, loquats, cherries, roses, blackberries, strawberries. We'll also talk about some other important fruit crops that include grapes, olives, walnuts, and pecans. So in the Rosaceae family, it highlights one of the top fruits in this family, which is apple, Malus domestica. Malus meaning bad in the Latin in reference to Eve's fall during her time in the Garden of Eden. It is a crop that originated out of Kazakhstan. It made its way to China and ultimately was brought by the Spanish via Mexico and South America. It's also important to note that there are wild crab apples that originate in North America, but the sweet apples that we're accustomed to are ones that were domesticated and originated out of Kazakhstan. The ones here in the United States were not sweet and were quite bitter. And the Native Americans helped teach those that were colonizing how to cultivate these crab apples, and also with the new apple varieties being brought in from the Spanish, they also brought in honeybees from Europe because honeybees play a really important role in helping pollinate these apple crops. But the fruits that came from the wild crab apples produced cider and even fermented cider called hard cider. And Thomas Jefferson was actually known as a bit of a botanical person with a green thumb who brought in fruit tree cuttings, including apples, into his nursery. So that motto, "An apple day keeps the doctor away," kind of came out of this time when Prohibition was taking place. If you recall, Prohibition was a time when it was illegal to produce alcohol. So Michael Pollan and others wrote about this time where you were less likely to grow apples because you couldn't grow them for cider. But cider was more prevalent than really anything else, especially in rural places. And so after the Prohibition, when it was okay to produce cider again, to get people to grow apples, they sort of cooked up this motto that it was good to produce apples and sell apples as a way to make money, but also provide apples that could be eaten fresh or used for producing cider. As you know, many of our apple varieties are grafted. They don't come by seed. There was a person, John Chapman, actually native to Massachusetts, who moved throughout the Midwest and West, bringing apples, particularly from seed, and he got the name Johnny Appleseed. He also brought cuttings along with him, and his motto was he lived for others, to really improve people's lives by bringing apples wherever he went. He actually even lived in Fort Wayne, and there's a park dedicated to him. There's actually a festival for him every fall. The fruit itself is a pome, and the fruits are produced from flowers that are usually pinkish white, and the tree is a dicot, and you can see that star shape. You can note that a pome has a thin exocarp, a fleshy mesocarp, and this exocarp that is kind of flexible and covers around the seeds or pips. Apple production takes place all around the world. Top producers include China, then the United States, Poland, and Turkey. The US has several states where a lot of apple production takes place, including Washington and Michigan, California, New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. But all of 50 states can produce apples. There are lots of different varieties of apples. In fact, it's one of those food crops we know the variety by name, whether it's Fuji or Granny Smith or Honeycrisp. Many of them are adapted to local climates. Um, and it's important to note that fruit trees, particularly apple trees, need to be grown near other apple trees that are not the same species so that you can get good cross pollination. So you might want to put a Granny Smith in with a Honeycrisp and have them cross pollinate. If you don't do this, then the fruit won't set on either crop. Much of the crop is grafted onto a crabapple rootstock. You can click this link to watch the video. Nutritionally, apples are a good source of fiber and antioxidants. They are also a good source of boron and fructose. Other fruits that come from the Rosaceae family include all of these fruits that produce a pit or a seed: plum, peach, nectarine. But if we look at peach, peach actually originated out of China and is a major world producer. They have a lot of important cultural context. Peaches symbolize immortality and is often used as a symbol in Chinese art. It made its way to the United States via the Spanish, and much of the peaches have been here so long they're almost practically native, but the production and the quality can be quite low. So we typically graft in peaches onto other rootstock. Major production includes Georgia, California, and Washington. Cherries come in different colors. We have the Bing cherry. We also have this cherry that we typically see coming out of Washington called the Rainier cherry. And they are also have 3 points of origin: Europe, Western Asia, and Africa. So anytime when there's multiple points of origin for a crop, I'm not going to hold you to knowing all of that. But I do want you to know the fruits are drupes, and they arrived in North America during colonization into New York. Again, very similar production areas to apple. Much of the cherry production is sweet, though we do have sour cherries, which are pretty popular in Michigan. Much of the fruit is for fresh consumption with some processing for like cherry pie filling and dried cherries and so forth. Cherry trees were donated via the mayor of Tokyo as a symbol of friendship, and they are quite a beautiful sight to behold. And then we have a group of fruits that belong to Rosaceae where they're not actually berries, just like strawberry. It's derived from one flower, but multiple ovaries. And we're really eating that fleshy receptacle that turns red. They're high in anthocyanins, which is why they're red. Some people are allergic to those compounds, and so they can genetically alter it to remove this FRA1 gene, which causes them to be white. Originally, strawberries were wild and only were diploid, but now with lots of cultivation, they can have up to 8 sets of chromosomes. Major production occurs in California and Florida. It's important to note that strawberries actually have 2 points of origin. We have some that are from Europe and some that are adapted and grew up here in North America, the woodland alpine strawberry. And it was bred to produce the strawberries that we know today using our wild strawberry and a Chilean strawberry. So kind of an interesting story there. Other fruits that are aggregates include the raspberries, and you can see the flower developing here into the raspberry, but it also includes black raspberry, blackberry, longanberry, and boysenberry. Blackberries are native to North America, and there is some history that says that blackberry's deep color can represent Christ's blood, and the thorns from the brambles can represent the crown of thorns. In British folklore, you're not supposed to eat blackberries on October 11th because that's when they say the devil fell out of heaven and into a blackberry bush, cursing the fruit as he fell. I don't know how you feel about that. I like blackberries, and that's not going to hold me back. And blackberries grow in a 2-year cycle. 1 year they produce the fruits, and the next year they produce the fruits for the next year. So every other year you'll have blackberries. And US does a lot of blackberry production. And if it's not in the US, then it's in Mexico. Blueberries and cranberries. These are true berries, finally, and they're both native to North America. So blueberries were very important in Native American Indian cuisine, and they were very nutritious. And when colonists came here, they were taught by Native Americans how to preserve them. And it was said that by de Champlain that it was like manna in winter. When the food was scarce, they used pemmican, which was a mixture of meat and fat and blueberries. And this allowed for those families to survive that first winter. The types of blueberries that were prevalent in that time were low bush blueberries, and they span from Canada down to the northeastern United States, as far south as the Smokies and west as the Great Lakes. And you can see they're kind of shrubby, bushy, and you have to bend over, squat down to harvest them. And that was something that I did as a pastime as a kid. I also read this book by Robert McCloskey called Blueberries for Sal. I even read it to my children, and it's all about a little girl named Sal following her mother as she's picking blueberries, and she gets kind of distracted and wanders off, is eating more blueberries than she's picking. So the mother's moving along, and suddenly Sal finds herself following a mama black bear. Conversely, the little baby bear is following Sal's mom, and it ends up that they both figure out how to get back to their moms, who are all out to pick some blueberries. Robert McCloskey also wrote Make Way for Ducklings, which is another New England classic based on talking about a police officer that allowed the ducklings to pass in the Boston Common. The types of blueberries you would see here in the Midwest and really almost anywhere in the world now are southern high bush blueberries, which are a related variety that have been modified to grow, have a taller growth habit and have larger berries. The fruits themselves are berries. The inside is clear or white and the outside is blue. Now, I talked a bit about this in class that blueberry production is really seasonal here, in the summer into the fall between United States and California. But October to April is the off season in the US, and much of the production occurs in the South, in Latin America, like Chile, and they will send them in passenger planes up here to the United States because the product is so perishable. Cranberries are another Native American staple crop, and they consumed it to help prevent a vitamin C deficiency called scurvy. And you can see these people standing in a bog. The crop is actually grown similar to low blush blueberries, where it's kind of low to the ground, but it takes 2 years for the fruits to mature, and it's hard to tell who's mature and who is not. So a way to get around that is they flood the bog when they're ready to harvest, and the berries themselves have a lot of air inside, and so they'll float to the surface, and that'll make it easier for them to harvest. So this is something that I grew up with in Massachusetts, but also New Jersey, Oregon, and Washington are good places for cranberries to grow. They also are very reliant on acidic conditions in the soil, similar to blueberries. And so that's something that limits cranberry and blueberry production because not a lot of our US soil is acidic enough. They're high in antioxidants like blueberries, and we typically use them during Thanksgiving or the holidays to celebrate the season. Otherwise, you'll see it in juice. Other fruit crops that are not in the Rosaceae family include grapes, which is botanically another berry. There's three sort of categories. You have the vineyard grapes that are used for wine, muscadine grapes that are wild and native to the United States that are really not great for wine nor great for table consumption. And they have table grapes, and these are ones that you see in the store as green or purple or red, and these ones are ones you eat fresh. These originated out of Mesopotamia, but also, like I said, muscadine are out of North America. So they have 2 points of origin. Scripture talks a lot about grapes, a lot about wine, but even noted that Noah grew them on his farm. Today, a lot of the production of grapes is used for wine, with about 25% for fresh fruit, and the rest is for dried as raisins. Now, seedless grapes are a result of a mutation that causes them to be sterile, and now we vegetatively propagate them. You can watch this video here to learn more. Now, another fruit crop is olives. You've probably never eaten an olive right off the tree. In fact, if you tried, you probably would regret it because they really are not edible when they come right off the tree. They have to be fermented and brined and treated in such a way to make the fruit soft enough to consume. They grow on trees like this, and most olives that we have growing here in the United States are in California. They have multiple points of origin as well: Mediterranean, Asia, and Africa. Scripture talks about the olive branch as a symbol of peace, but also abundance and glory. They made their way from around the world via the Spanish colonists, where they found that they could propagate them well in Peru and Chile. We know that they are bitter when they're fresh. They really can't eat them because of this compound called allarapin that has to be removed. Otherwise, the fruit is inedible. So they're cured to remove this compound through brining and drying and salting and lye. Lye is a treatment that helps to leach out that allarapin. Production of olives expands the world from Australia to California and New Zealand. There's green olives and black olives and Kalamata olives. Those are the ones you'll see in Greek salad. But you can also press the olive to release oils, which is how we get olive oil. Okay, so while we might think of walnuts as nuts, we can recognize that they're actually drupes. Drupes because on the exterior here, this green is their exocarp, then this sort of fibrous mesocarp, this kind of stony exocarp, and then on the inside right here is the seed fruit that we are accustomed to eating. Walnuts are originated out of Persia, and they were colloquially called English walnuts. They were traded along the Silk Route, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about spices. They became cultivated here in the 1700s. What's kind of interesting to know about walnuts is that they have a lot of essential fats, essential fatty acids, and protein. And there was a time that people would sort of say if the food looks like a part of the body, like an organ, then it must be good for that organ. Like if the leaves are heart shaped, then that must mean that it's good for the heart. Or if, in the case of walnut, it looks like a brain, maybe it's good for the brain. In almost every case, they got it wrong and it wasn't true. But in the case of walnuts, they did get it right because those fats are really good for brain health. Other fruits that are technically nuts, botanically considered nuts, are chestnut and hazelnut. And we know hazelnut is very popular now because of its use in Nutella. Okay, so that wraps us up on temperate fruits, and now we're going to jump into tropical.